Having argued that the new Ofsted criteria is not a return to facts, 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 or an attack on the importance of skills, I think it's really important that we define what the curriculum is. Christine Counsell was really influential in the construction of the new Ofsted framework, and she argues that the curriculum should be seen as a narrative. If you imagine your subject as a huge library with all of the disciplinary and substantive knowledge within it, then there is literally no story to make sense of this subject. It is the curriculum that creates this story of our subject. Following the library analogy, the curriculum would be like a bookshelf on which we select the most significant parts of the story we want to tell. And to make the decision about what we select, we need to first decide what the big ideas are in our subject. And then every single thing that we select to put within our curriculum is justified in relation to how successfully they achieve the teaching of these big ideas. For example, within English, Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is often taught in secondary schools. Putting this novel onto the curriculum is designed to develop a number of big ideas. Firstly, it debates class and gender, but also, because the book has been interpreted in so many different ways, it allows us to ask the question, does the author's intent matter? Which is another of the big ideas in English literature. The novel isn't selected because it's fun or interesting or new, but because it's the best way to deliver a curriculum focused around these big ideas. Using big ideas to create a narrative throughout your curriculum has proven to be really successful with the delivery of maths. An Australian academic, Diane Seaman, argues that one of the biggest ideas in mathematics is the understanding of number. And so as a result of this big idea, she suggests young children in Year 1 should be taught something she refers to as trusting the count 1 to 10. Rather than students trying to count up to 20 at a very young age, it's far more important that they know that 2 and 8 makes 10, that 3 and 7 makes 10, that 6 is 1 after 5. By having the big idea of understanding numbers as her driving force, the curriculum is far more likely to focus on those most essential steps to achieving mastery in this area. In just the same way that a compelling novel has big themes and big ideas running right throughout it, so too can our curriculums, and the more we do this, the more likely they are to be coherent. Once we've selected the big ideas for our curriculum, we need to specify precisely what it is we wish to deliver. These are the exact facts, dates, events that we wish to teach and deliver as part of our curriculum. This is centrally important for creating a sense of coherence across your curriculum. And there are 3 reasons why it's very important to plan our curriculum carefully and specifically. Students aren't taught by the same teacher every year. And so, if we're not very specific in what exactly we're going to deliver, there's a chance that the interpretation of one teacher to the next will create confusion within our curriculum. For example, one science scheme of work specified that in Year 1, students should identify and describe the basic structures of a variety of common flowering plants. In Year 2, they were asked to identify and name a variety of plants and animals in their habitat, including microhabitats. Because the exact plants selected and the exact functions discussed is not specified, it leaves it up to the guesswork of the teacher to make a decision. So in Year 1, they might have taught the sunflower, whilst in Year 2, the teacher might have selected an orchid, which would make it much more difficult for the student to build on their prior learning. Another reason for specifying exactly what it is we intend to teach is the advantage in terms of coherence that's achieved between lessons. If we want one lesson to build on the next, we need to be able to easily spot the terms and connections that run across our curriculum. And the chance of us doing this on an ad hoc day-to-day basis is reduced if we don't know exactly what it is that connects. By being specific about this in our planning and our construction of our curriculum, it's far more likely that we will deliver a joined-up approach. And by having a joined-up narrative, students will stop seeing our course as just the constant piling up of facts, but instead as a rich web of connections and interrelationships. A final reason why it's important for us to be very specific is that we can create coherence if all of our resources are singing from the same hymn sheet. By having the same definitions in our textbooks, our revision resources, and our lessons, we take away the unnecessary parts of our curriculum, which allow us to focus more time on the things that are most important, the big ideas that we spoke about at the beginning. Again, if we want to create a compelling narrative for our students, we need to make sure that we're very specific in our planning, so that we emphasize the most important big ideas again and again in our teaching, and also develop a joined-up approach when putting our curriculum into practice. The final area I wanted to consider is the idea of sequencing. Authors deliberately insert events early in their stories that make the early story flow, but also to furnish the reader's memory, so that later in the novel, when another event takes place, we get a satisfying resolution or a newly puzzling twist. So in Council's own words, narrative is structured in a particular way to make sure things do stay with us. Each topic must in some way fit with the overarching narrative which it strives to create. Narratives must be structured to keep multiple strands all spinning at once. Thus the early stages stay warm in memory so we can interpret every new element, and narratively is constantly unifying, pulling things together so that they function. A narrative works on its reader through constant interplay between the familiar and the strange, and things can only be familiar or strange by virtue of earlier reference points, ones that stick with us. For example, the reason why people were so shocked when Daenerys flew in on her dragon destroying King's Landing in Game of Thrones was because the audience were really familiar with Daenerys' violence and her need for power, but found it quite strange that she was acting in such an unjust way and also betraying so many of those close to her. This combination of the familiar and the strange created a much richer character, and it was this that made the narrative so compelling to the audience. In the same way that a science curriculum might introduce the idea that an electrical circuit is just like a water pump turning a turbine, and this has been really successful at teaching students about resistance, voltage, and the completeness of a circuit for generations. Because students are so familiar with this concept, later in a course, when they are taught that breaking a water pipe and breaking an electrical circuit are completely different and the analogy no longer works, this comes as a huge surprise. And returning to the idea of a narrative, this becomes a newly puzzling twist in the story of their scientific understanding. So, in conclusion, we need to start by constructing our curriculum around big ideas. Then being really explicit about the content we want to use, specifying in meticulous detail the connections, examples, and illustrations that we plan to use, and then sequencing these in the most logical way to tell the most compelling and interesting story about our subject that we possibly can.